Welcome back, everyone. Go ahead and turn down the lights, maybe pull up a chair, because today, well, we're doing things a little bit differently. Today's explainer is structured as a classic campfire ghost story, and we're pulling this one straight from the desolate, pitch-black stretches of Arizona's Route 66. We're going to break down the anatomy of a truly terrifying encounter out in the desert, looking at exactly what happened to a guy named Jake Thompson on one freezing October night. So get comfortable, keep your eyes on the shadows, and let's dive right in. So if you've ever watched a horror movie or, listened to an urban legend, you probably already know the answer to this. What is the one absolute rule of driving a lonely desert highway at midnight? Right. You don't stop. You never stop. Out there in the desert, there are no houses, no gas stations, no streetlights. It's literally just an endless road cutting through absolute darkness. And as we're about to see, breaking this cardinal rule is exactly what triggers the whole terrifying chain of events in our story today. Picture this. It's 11:47 p.m. Jake Thompson is cruising in his old pickup truck, heading home after visiting a buddy in Flagstaff. He's got country music playing softly. It's just a perfectly normal, quiet drive. But then, at exactly 11:48 p.m., that sense of normalcy just shatters. The music abruptly cuts out. This harsh, aggressive radio static suddenly fills the cab of the truck. And within just a few moments, this weird interference, it's going to manifest into something entirely physical, standing right in the middle of absolute nowhere. Pushing right through that hissing static on the radio, Jake hears it. A weak, desperate woman's voice. "Please help me. Please don't leave me here." Jake is totally confused. The signal is super weak. He looks around, but there are zero other cars on the road. Not a single headlight anywhere. So he figures, okay, it's got to be just someone bleeding over onto a nearby radio frequency, right? But then, the static flares back up, followed by a sudden, blood-curdling scream that literally pierces the silence of the truck. And after that, the radio just goes completely dead. Just dead silence. Okay, let's dive into this moment, because Jake is terrified. He's sitting frozen behind the wheel, desperately trying to convince himself it was just some weird prank. But exactly 1 mile down the road, his headlights sweep across something in the darkness. It's a woman. She's standing completely motionless on the shoulder, wearing this dirty white dress, her long black hair covering most of her face, and she slowly lifts one hand, asking for a ride. Now, every single survival instinct is screaming at you to keep driving. Would you pull over? Well, Jake just couldn't leave someone stranded out there in the dark, so he hits the brakes. Jake rolls down the passenger window and asks if she's okay, and the woman just stands there for a second, totally silent. Then she finally speaks. "Can you take me home?" Now, the absolutely terrifying part of this moment is that when she speaks, Jake feels this violent chill crawl right down his spine. Because her voice, it sounds exactly like the desperate, whispering voice that just came through his dead radio. Still, despite the absolute terror gripping him, he nervously says, "Sure," and she climbs up into the cab. The second she sits down, the whole atmosphere inside the truck violently shifts. It's incredibly unnatural. First, this suffocating smell fills the tight space. It smells like wet earth, like freshly dug soil. Next, this heavy, oppressive silence takes over. Jake keeps glancing over at her, but she doesn't move. She doesn't even blink. She's just staring dead ahead at the windshield. And to make matters worse, despite the heater literally running on full blast, this unnatural freezing cold starts creeping into the cab. After what feels like 20 excruciating minutes of just driving in total silence, Jake happens to glance down at his dashboard. The temperature gauge reads 35 degrees. Like I said, the heater is roaring, but the temperature inside this enclosed cab is plummeting. It feels like they're driving with the doors wide open in the dead of winter. And it doesn't stop there. As they keep driving, that digital display drops again, 30 degrees. The chill is literally biting right through Jake's clothes now. It honestly feels less like weather and more like an actual physical presence radiating straight from the passenger seat. 28 degrees. The cab is basically a freezer at this point. It is so bone-chillingly cold that every time Jake exhales, his breath forms these thick, white clouds in the air. His hands are practically frozen to the steering wheel. Desperate to break this suffocating tension, he finally asks her if she knows what happened out here on this stretch of road. And that is when the woman finally turns her head to look at him. For the very first time, Jake gets a clear look at her face beneath all that tangled hair. Her skin is shockingly pale, but the worst part? Right across her throat is a deep, jagged scar. She looks at Jake, and with a voice that sounds so distant, Like it's echoing from a mile away, she whispers, "I died here 20 years ago." Jake is in sheer panic. He nearly swerves his truck entirely off the highway. She just keeps speaking. She explains that a man picked her up on this exact highway 2 decades ago. And the literal second she says this, the truck starts to violently shake. The headlights start flickering and dimming against the pitch-black desert. She tells him the man promised to take her home. Then, staring right into Jake's eyes, she says, he lied. Every instinct in Jake's body is screaming at him to slam on the brakes and run for his life, but his hands are just locked onto the wheel. So the absolutely crucial point is what happens next. The woman points out into the darkness ahead and tells Jake to stop. Looming out of the gloom is this abandoned, heavily rusted gas station. Jake slams on the brakes, the truck skids to a halt in the dirt, and he turns to look at the passenger seat. But it's completely empty. She is just gone. Jake had literally just experienced the phenomenon of the vanishing hitchhiker, that classic piece of folklore where a spirit just inexplicably disappears from a closed vehicle. The heavy truck door never opened. There are 0 footprints in the dirt outside. Nothing. Now, most people would hit the gas and never look back, right? But Jake notices this faint, unnatural light glowing deep inside that abandoned gas station. Going against literally every ounce of common sense, he grabs his flashlight and steps out into the howling desert wind. He walks past the creaking, rusted sign, crosses the threshold into this rotting building, and sweeps his light over the broken shelves. And he starts following the sound of faint whispers. It sounds like dozens of voices, all speaking at once, coming from the back of the station. Behind the ruined counter, buried under a thick layer of dust, Jake spots a photograph. He wipes the dirt away, and, his blood runs absolutely cold. It's a picture of a young woman in a white dress. It is the exact same woman who is just sitting next to him in his truck. And right below her photo is a yellowed newspaper clipping with a chilling headline, "Local Girl Missing, 2006. But there's another clipping tucked right underneath it. Jake pulls it out. This one is dated a few months later, and it confirms the tragic reality of what he's dealing with here. It reads, "Body found in desert. Suspect never caught." He wasn't just giving a ghost a ride. He was driving a murder victim right back to the site of her death. But before Jake can even process this, a massive crash echoes through the darkness behind him. The real danger has just shown up. The front door of the gas station violently slams shut all by itself. Those whispers, they grow way louder and way closer. From the pitch black behind the station, he hears slow, heavy footsteps. Thump, thump, thump. Something is walking toward him. Jake frantically points his flashlight at the back window, and shining right back at him in the beam of light are these bright, unnatural, deeply smiling eyes. Pure adrenaline takes over. Jake bursts through the heavy front door and sprints blindly towards his truck. But those heavy footsteps are following him, and they're getting faster. Faster, faster! He can literally hear the thud of heavy boots hitting the desert dirt right on his heels. He practically dives into the cab of his pickup and slams down the locks, just in the absolute nick of time. From the safety of the locked cab, the figure finally steps out of the darkness and into the glow of Jake's headlights. It's a tall, terribly thin man in old, dirt-stained work clothes. His face is twisted into this impossibly wide, stretching grin. But the true nightmare here? As Jake stares in absolute horror, he realizes the man isn't actually walking. His boots aren't touching the dirt at all. He is floating, suspended a few inches above the ground. Jake rips the truck into gear, the engine roars, and he tears out of there, watching that smiling, floating man shrink in the rearview mirror until he's completely swallowed by the dark. By dawn, Jake finally makes it home. He survived. He doesn't tell anyone, he just buries the trauma. Years go by. He even moves away, eventually finding himself driving through an entirely different state, miles and miles away from Route 66. But then, one night, right around midnight, the radio in his car suddenly crackles. The static is back. The music dies, and coming through the speakers is that deeply familiar, whispery voice. It's her. "Thank you for finding me." Jake freezes, his blood turning to ice. But then she finishes the sentence, "But he still hasn't left." And suddenly, her voice is abruptly cut off by a second voice coming through the radio. It's a deep, heavy male voice, and it sounds like whoever is speaking is sitting directly in his back seat. Right before the radio dies completely, clicking back into that total, oppressive silence, Jake hears a low, raspy whisper that's going to haunt him for the rest of his life. I'm still looking for a ride. The terrifying reality here is that Jake didn't just leave a ghost behind in the desert. He might have actually awakened the very monster that put her there. And that brings us to the end of today's Campfire Explainer. It's a pretty chilling reminder that some stories absolutely refuse to stay buried in the dirt of Route 66. So I'll leave you with one final thought. The next time you find yourself driving down a lonely stretch of highway at midnight, just as the radio starts to turn to static, maybe take a quick look in your rearview mirror. Who might you be sharing your car with? Stay safe out there on the roads, everyone.